Any old business?
Actually, I do. I heard Diane's voice here, but I can't see her. You brought up a point on the FEMA, the flood mapping, and it was perfect timing because I don't know if anyone saw in the Philadelphia Inquirer this weekend a pretty sizable article on the new maps and how they're making waves in communities and impacting people with homeowners or flood insurance. And I don't know if you guys get the paper, but it was pretty interesting. It tells kind of both sides of the story. And I guess one of the things that was probably the biggest eye catcher was some of these folks who, in similar situations to us, live on a tributary that you would not confuse with the Mississippi. But in fact, after the mapping was done, their their flood insurance policy was $2,400 a year. This is in Radnor Township in PA. So I guess my question is, with the maps and the request, is it like we're requesting, say, Norwood Street wasn't on the map, so we want it on the map? Are we saying that on the map as a physical feature, or are we asking to put it on and reconsider it as a flood zone?
It's on as a physical feature. What it doesn't have is a flood zone around it.
So the current, the new map?
It used to have one. The new one does not.
Right, it does not have
And the question is, was that actually taken off for a reason? And they requested information from us about whether, in fact, it floods and how it floods.
So then that process, if we're providing, I know the engineer was going to provide some information to FEMA. Once that is done and they determine something, I guess, to Diane's point earlier, is if this is going to impact people financially along that area, are we going to, is it an automatic, yes, it is a flood zone now that you provided, or are we going to have a discussion amongst the engineer and the residents that live along it?
It's my understanding that we send the data to FEMA, and they, based on what their criteria are, they will determine whether, in fact, it is a flood zone or it's not a flood zone. And then another set of maps come out for review. And then there's another review period based on those maps. I don't think that it's not. Are you asking whether the residents can say yes, it's a flood zone or not
actually,
a flood zone?
Well, after reading this article, I actually went on their website and did some research. There's a lot of information, but one of the things that stuck out is two things. Residents can actually file a
right, you can file appeal of the map.
An appeal that if it affects them. But I guess secondly is by going back and providing this information, how does it help the borough? If it wasn't a flood zone on the current draft map, and we're going back saying you missed this should be a flood zone, how does that help us? That's where I guess I'm confused in reading some of the stories in this article. A lot of people have been impacted by it. So I guess that's my question is, if FEMA determined at first glance it's not a flood zone going forward, going back to them and saying, oh yes, make it a flood zone, or here's the information, you decide, how does that help us? What does that do for us, I guess, is my question. I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that. We haven't sent the information in yet.
Okay.
Because actually Mary Ellen had just emailed me asking me if I have some of this information electronically that she can send. I don't know the answer to that. Whether it helps or it hinders.
It's very informative. FEMA.gov has a lot of information on this, so I don't know, Diane, your point, if the residents are interested, they can look into it as well. So I guess the engineer will make some information available to them, and is it going to be just they come back with a new map, or are we going to have
the
discussion?
next step, there was the review period. They asked everyone to look at it from a non-technical point of view. That is, are the street names correct? Right. Mary Ellen noticed that they didn't have the borough line in the right place. There were some things like that. So we're going to send that information back. She also compared the current map to the previous maps and saw that the flood zone was no longer around Skunky. It was on a previous map. It's not on the current map. There was a change in the outline of the flood areas on Newtown Creek. So I sent the comments back to FEMA, and I said, just in general, I just said we noticed there's some discrepancies in where the borough line is on the map versus where it actually is. We also noticed that Skunky is listed as a tributary to Newtown Creek, and it no longer has the zone X around it that was on the previous map. Was this omitted in error, or was this omitted, was this a change? And then I said, if you need additional information, get back. And within a couple days, I got an email back saying, please send us more detail on these two items so that we can compare the
So-
information that we have. And then based on that, then they come out with the next set of maps that are then open for public review again. That they're not adopted immediately. There's another level of review, and I believe at that level is a more of a technical review as opposed to just, are the street names correct?
Right. I guess that was my first question was,
Yeah.
are we just trying to identify the actual geography of what it looks like versus are we requesting a review of that, yes, this should or should not be?
We didn't really request a review of whether this should or should not be a flood zone. We were just like noticing that things were on a
Okay.
map that were not on the map this time that were on before. But in terms of what that impact is, I mean, I could certainly ask Mary Ellen.
Yeah, I think it's something we should consider because it's going to impact
Yeah.
quite a few folks.
Well, Skunky's going to flood on their properties whether they're on the map or not.
Well, I mean,
But what does that mean in terms of insurance?
Well,
guess
again, I
that's what
think
you're saying.
there's one thing of being required, which
Yeah.
once it is, you are obligated and have to,
Uh-huh.
versus you make your own independent decision.
Okay.
So I guess that's the question I have.
Okay, I will email Mary Ellen and see if we can find out
Okay.
the answer to that.
Do we actually know the answer to that question? That's a very good question. Because it's existing on the map today, do any property owners have to pay flood insurance because of skunk?
When I looked at, I think it was the 2003 map that's current, Skunky goes up to South Chancellor, Linton Park, and that's it, from State Street. And it is Zone X. So I'm not sure, and now maybe, I didn't know, maybe with the Newtown station and that basin put in, they deemed it not necessary to be an X, because X, I think, is mild to moderate or small to low risk, I guess is what they put. So I don't know if homeowners currently have it or not, because if it is, they would be obligated.
Right. The flip side, I guess, the other concern would be Newtown Creek. If that flood area expanded, which it sounds like maybe it did.
It's a different configuration. I'm not
different
sure if it's
configuration.
bigger or
Okay.
not, but it's not the same
But what's the
configuration.
potential impact of that
Right.
as well?
Yeah.
You raise a good question.
Okay. All right, well, we'll see if we can find out the answers to that.